Okay, first of all, I would like to mute everybody so that we can have a more talk. And if you have any problem, just interrupt me, and I'm happy to answer the questions. Okay, I would now start the share screen. Okay, this is the first of what are you doing? The computer is being stupid. So let me stop it from listening to what I'm saying, and then, okay. The computer thing I was trying to edit the PowerPoint. Okay, I hope you have no problem seeing the PowerPoint. And this is the first of three, and I will be talking about trade war, technology war, or whether there will be a Cold War. So today we will on trade war, and which is in a Trump's days. Okay, so we see a crash between United States and China. Obviously, we need to look back a little bit of history and see why that happened. So this is what happened. I will have a more detailed discussion about all this. So go to the background first. This is a curve indicating the trade balance of US between 1960 and 2016. We see that before the middle of 1970s, around 1975 or 6,
Oh, jeez.
the
Christ.
United States started to have a trade deficit represented by the curve moving downwards. And before that, United States have been keeping a slight trade surplus. So what we need to understand is what happened in 1970, middle 1970, which produced this change of the goods and service trade balance of the United States. The United States ran a surplus or a small deficit throughout the 1960s and 1970s, after which we see a large deficit open in 1980s and continue to expand throughout 1990s and 2000s. So that is the first remark coming from CFR.org, is the US commercial website. The impact is, of course, what I call China shock. China opened up in 1978. By opening up, China released a huge workforce into the global labor market. The US companies seeking profits move manufacturing to areas with lower living standards. Hence, with China opening, they move en masse to China. Now, China called this open and reform. So that's two parts. The first part is opening up, allowing China to participate in world trade. Second is reforms. That
Yeah,
means
good. Who's that?
sorry?
Oh, g'day. How you going?
Good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
I've sent you an email actually. Just do the same for Gavin again. $5,000 into Great British pounds.
Sorry, I don't know what you're talking. We are on a Zoom conference talking about China trade. Who are you?
Okay,
So you are not in the class. Please exit
sure,
the Zoom now.
sure. Peter Urban, 171244.
I don't know what you're talking about. We are talking. This is a
Yep,
UVA
yep. Grospard
cross.
and Limoges actually. Sure.
Okay.
Yep,
Since we
yep.
have some interruptions, I think I will go back um to the Zoom, and I will
Uh,
stop sharing first, and then put everybody on mute so that we can
okay, go ahead.
Okay, mute everybody. Okay, I will continue the Zoom section, which is this one. Okay. So there's two parts, the open and reform. So we talk about the open up. China released a huge amount of workforce into the global labor market by letting companies to come into China to do manufacturing. And of course, obviously, China also participating in selling goods and so forth. The second part is reform. So let's look at what do we mean by China's reform. Okay, I will come to this point first and then come back to what's mean by reform from looking from the China side. Okay, we are still looking at the US side. The US dollars has been with the Bretton Woods Agreement since 1940s. This agreement guarantee the convertibility of US dollars to silver. At that time, it's 35 US dollars per ounce of gold. So there are silver and gold link is backed up by gold. And require all the participating countries to keep their currencies in line with US dollars to a 1% within the fixed rates. So that was the Bretton Woods system. Unfortunately, in 1971, August 15, under Nixon, United States one-sidedly said it would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. But this temporary becomes permanent. Today, we can only use US dollars to convert to gold by going to the gold market. And we know that today, the gold market, the price of gold is around $2,000 per ounce. That means even in this very short period of time, the United States, compared with gold, the US dollars had depreciated almost 80 times, maybe 70 times, okay, 70 times. And from there onwards, US dollars becomes a fiat currency, meaning this currency is no longer supported by commodities. It is not directly convertible through US government systems to other valuable goods. Of course, we can use US dollars to buy whatever we want, but from the government point of view, the US government is no longer required to convert US dollars into any valuable assets. So that's called fiat currency. And to support fiat currency, we need trust that the US dollars will remain valuable within a certain period of time. I am happy to receive $1 US in exchange of something from me, maybe a good or a service, because I expect within a certain time I will be able to use this $1 to receive equal values of goods or service. So that all depends on trust. But that dependent on trust also dependent on the national strength of United States. We believe that United States will remain powerful, and hence it will honor its commitment to make sure the US dollars is still worthy. But whether this commitment is still hold up or not, that depends on our understanding of the situation. Unfortunately, with the US dollars being a global currency, meaning because of trade, people need to have some reserve of the currency which you use to trade. Since the world has been using US dollars as a trade currency, they typically will also use the US dollars as a reserve currency as well, or at least as part of its reserve currency. But that gives a dilemma here because of the economic interest between a short-term domestic and long-term international objectives. For countries whose currencies serve as gold reserve currency or reserve currency. This dilemma was identified by a Belgian-American economist who pointed out that the country whose currency being global reserve currency, foreign nations wish to hold must be willing to supply the world with extra supply of its currency to fulfill the world demand for these foreign exchange reserves, leading to a trade deficit. So that is a very straightforward explanation. We need US dollars circulating outside the United States in order to allow US dollars as a trading currency and as a reserve currency. So if your country remain trade surplus, that means you're collecting more currency than you send the currency out. So your currency cannot become a global reserve currency. So if you ask me whether China renminbi can become a global reserve currency, my simple answer to you is no, not at this time. Until China has great trade deficit, that won't happen. And I don't believe China will have trade deficit. So Chinese currency will never become a global reserve currency, simply because there isn't sufficient Chinese currency circulating outside of China in order to make it a global reserve currency. But there is a caveat here. When the China's economy is several times larger than the rest of the world, then it's a different story. Because at that time, a small amount of Chinese currency flowing outside will sufficient to mediate the global trade. And at that situation, then China's trade currency may become global currency. But I don't think I will have the opportunity to see that day. So I don't think within my lifetime, Chinese currency can become a global currency. Another flip side of this being global currency is that the government can print money, and using very minimal effort. Printing money is a very minimal effort. You can exchange for whatever asset you desire, whether it's goods or service. And therefore, when there's an easy way to make money, everybody goes to this easy way and forgotten about manufacturing. So a consequence of this is that the US trade deficit grow and grow and grow. Of course, within there is a huge component of China here. Chinese components very large here. But it doesn't mean that this is the only country having a trade surplus against US. Other countries have the same surplus. For example, Mexico, Vietnam, Germany, Japan, Iraq, Ireland, and rest of the world. China represents about 1/3 of US deficit because China is the world's largest trading partner. At the beginning, say in 1997, China represents only about 1/5, but that part grow bigger and bigger, whereas the other countries' trade surplus against United States grows, but not that much. For example, Japan almost have no growth. And Germany, after say 2012, basically not much change. The biggest change is actually coming from China. I will explain that a little bit later on. So when money printing can replace hard work, the industrial capacity is rapidly replaced by currency manipulation and financial activities. So we see U.S. changing from a second manufacturing, second industry into the third industry, which is service industry. To maintain American dollars as a global reserve and trading currency, it requires a strong military, and therefore, U.S. has a very large defense budget. We all know that U.S. defense budget is larger than the next 8 or 10 countries combined. Maintaining such a huge expense budget means that the government is not able to allocate its own assets efficiently for solving its own domestic problems. So we see that the United States domestic problems is piling up more and more acute as the times go by. Using this point of view can also help us to explain why United States started the invasion of both Iraq and Libya. Both of these can be understood because Iraq want to use the European euros as its currency for selling its oil, whereas Libya want to use a new African gold called Dinar to sell its oil. Both of these deviate from the use of US dollars to trade in commodity, the oil, and hence will jeopardize the global currency status of US dollars. That becomes unacceptable to the US elites, and therefore we know that the excuse to invade Iraq is purely lies, and that explains why it have to invade Iraq, because they need to remove the person who advocates for using other currency as reserve or trading currency other than US dollars. So US dollars becomes a very important part of the whole US policy, including its foreign policy. Okay, come back to China. To explain why China suffered so much in the last few hundred years, let's say 200 years, is because China missed the Industrial Revolution. We all know that in 17-something, England first started to use steam power. They used coal to power a steam engine, which power water pumps in order for them to continue digging into the coal mines. And this changed our use of energy. Now, before this large-scale use of fossil energy, human control energy can only be our own energy, human energy, or energy coming from mainly our domesticated animals, like the cow, the horses, etc. Of course, sometimes we can use a little bit of wind power, for example, in Holland, or a little bit of water power as in water wheels, but they are more exception rather than norm. With the invention of steam engine, then the whole energy use shift from this animal power and human power into fossil fuel power. This particular change in the use of energy enable human beings to have the best life in the last 200 years. Our life improved so much in the last 200 years. If we look back, say 100 years ago, the world is completely different from today. Whereas 300 years ago and 500 years ago, the life of people are almost indistinguishable. They're almost the same. But we have a huge sudden change of human life in the past 100 years because we have access to a huge amount of energy. But of course, and we are now at a certain point where we need to change from fossil energy into something else. What's that something else? We hope that by the middle of this century, we will see renewable energy replacing most of the fossil energy. China having missed this industrial revolution, so it is not keeping in pace with the rest of the world. And if you don't advance, then you started to decline. So comparatively, China declined significantly, while the West progressed very rapidly into the modern age. And that makes China suffered and humiliated. So by the time Mao Zedong died in 1976, China faced a serious problem in its own economic development. So you need to open up and reform because at that time they just suffered from the 3-year famines followed by 10 years of cultural revolution. The country is in chaos. Deng Xiaoping grabbed the power and started this open and reform program. Basically, the reform means try to develop a path to industrialization because what China missed is the industrial revolution. So in order to get back, the easiest way is to get industrialized. If you want to get industrialized, you will need some initial capital. You will need know-how, and you will need human resources. And of course, most important of all is friendly industrial policies. So in terms of capital, at that time, China is very poor. So how can we get the first pool of capital? Well, by mobilizing the huge population, producing cheap handicraft style of goods to make the first lot of capital. So the only way China can do is release its workforce into the global market and becomes the global manufacturing hub. Now, if we compare China with India, in about 1970s, India's GDP and China's GDP is approximately the same, and they have approximately the same population. But compared to today, China is about 8 times the GDP of India, whereas India's population has already surpassed China. What's the difference? Why the two countries have such a different path in the last 50 years? One of the reasons is that China chose the low-end path, allowing everybody to participate in the global trade. Being a worker in a factory, textile factory, making T-shirts, making shoes, and so on. Whereas India want to enter into the world market through their so-called strong points, being able to speak English. So they went into as the world's software developers. Software developers is limited to a very small population of India. Not everybody speak English, and therefore its development is limited to a small group of people. Whereas in China, everybody can participate in this global trade because we just need factory workers, whether you're skilled or not. Of course, you are unskilled, you get paid less. So people naturally want to struggle and then learn and become skilled workers. So that is the path to innovation. The other part is, of course, know-how. The world has been developing for the past 200 years. China is behind, well behind by 300 years. What can we do? Well, learn. Learn from the basic. Learn from everything possible. So China started learning through initially manual labor and then progressively move upwards. And during reform opening, the Chinese government routinely sent out students to the West. At that time, about 10% of the students who went out into the West to learn will return to China. So people say, oh, you are letting the best of your people. There's a huge brain drain. Yes, because we just don't have any know-how. So the only way to learn it is through learning from the rest of the world. So sending people out. Although there's only 10% of people coming back, it's still 10%. Given the large Chinese population, that 10% is still significant. But today, the number of students coming back is at around 80%. Part of it thanks to the trade war. So this brain drain is now turning into a positive. And then there are more people coming into China trying to make a living. So the way of getting the know-how is both by sending students out to learn, as well as paying and buying the patents. China has spent a lot of money buying a lot of patents. Almost everything, if they can buy the patent, they will buy the patent instead of reinventing, because that is the cheapest way to actually get access to certain technology. Of course, the third part is the policy. Well, the first thing they do is set up special economic zone where the typical Chinese policy doesn't apply. In the special economic zone, they have their own policy in order to stimulate investment, stimulate manufacturing, and stimulate the path to reform. The most famous one is actually the one next to Hong Kong called Shenzhen. In 1970s, Shenzhen is a fishing village with a population of around 4,000. Today, it is a city with permanent residents number to about 50 million and mobile population of around 800 million. So it is a 2.23 million people city, bustling in every high-tech aspect. It started off as a special economic zone, doing textile, making shoes, making T-shirts, but progressively more and more technology companies move into this special economic zone, and now it becomes the Silicon Valley in the East. As I said, the way to get know-how is to invite foreign companies into China to invest. The first group of companies which entered into China are from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Basically, we are the same people speaking similar language with similar culture. It's easy. So Hong Kong at that time is also started to change from a industrial-based city into a service-based city. Hong Kong is now so-called a financial hub, very similar to United States. You have empty out its factories. The factories move to China. What remains is the financial controls and therefore becomes a financial center, similar to United States today. Most of the industry in United States has moved out. It is a financial center, basically, mostly. The other problem with China is that we have a huge population living in very remote area. These people cannot participate in this global trade, this global workshop. So what they do, get these people out. In order to get these people out, we have to build infrastructure. We have to allow them to be able to come out. Not only human can come out, their goods also need to come out. So China started to invest heavily in infrastructure. Today, we all know about China's high-speed rail. But high-speed rail only started in 2008 by inviting all the high-speed rail manufacturers around the world to provide China with its own high-speed rail. But during that process, China learned high-speed rail very quickly and now becomes the exporter of high-speed rail. Because China wants to get the initial capital, so it has to control the in and out of the money. So you have a very tight control of its currency. And it is very extremely export-oriented. Every work is oriented around export-oriented in order to earn the initial capital. Here, I call this timing and opportunity. China entered the World Trade Organization on the 1st of December 2001. And this is the signing ceremony on 2001, November 11. So on one side, China is growing. But on the other side, Japan provided a very good history lesson for China. Japan becomes the world's second largest economy around 1990s, actually 1980s. At that time, Japan, everything is very good, well-made, making a lot of money, becomes the world's second largest economy. But what happened? Then Japan entered into stagnation. Economic development sitting around at 0% or 0.1%, almost no economic growth. Why? Because United States and Europe together forced Japan currency to inflate rapidly through the Plaza Accord. To understand this, we have to understand at that time, Japan also suffered from huge bubbles, capital bubbles, because Japan's economy is so good, everybody is investing in real estate. So just the house in Tokyo will be able to buy all Americans' real estate. So that is a huge real estate bubble. But when United States and Europe force Japan to appreciate its currency, the impact is that the Japanese good becomes expensive because your currencies go up. And when you are manufacturing that that goods, it depends on your own population to produce it. So the cost of labor increase, and therefore your goods price increase. So competitiveness decrease because your product is expensive. On the other hand, while your currency is very strong, you can use that currency to almost buy anything you like. So a lot of Japanese go out and buy castles, buy paintings, and buy all those non-productive assets. Paintings, castles themselves do not produce economically. Or they may be good for preserving the value, but they are not producing economic returns. So a lot of money go out used to such a non-productive use, together with the lack of competition.
Hello?
Yes?
Well, you wouldn't believe it. I can't get sound. I can get the... Yeah, I can't get sound. I love it.
So you haven't been able to listen to all this?
No.
So that would be...
I've tried to connect the speakers and everything.
That would be the problem on your side, because all other members was able to listen to me. So I will mute you first, so you solve the problem at your end, because that is not my problem.
The speakers are on here. You can be lit up.
Okay. So China knows that when we become the second largest economy, we may face something similar to Japan. The Chinese leadership understand this. So they are preparing. They are preparing for this day to come, because by the sheer volume, the sheer size of China, the population size, when Chinese people's average is the same as testing. Can you still hear me? Testing. Yep. And why my video disappear? Okay, come back. Anyway, I will fix the video. We'll continue here. So by 2010, China actually becomes the second largest economy. And the prediction that the United States will start something to limit China's growth actually comes as expected. So before that, we look at what have China done right. First of all, maintain full control of currency, and hence it was protected from the Asia financial crisis. It has a huge firewall, shield the citizenship from Western ideologies, and also provided a protected zone for the development in internet technologies. We are talking about mobilizing the whole population to participate in global activities. And because of sheer size of China, then it diverges into every available engineering technologies. China is the only country which produces all the category goods in the UN categories. And then because of that, he also built a complete supply chain. And then, as I said, in 2008, he started building his high-speed rail. Okay, the collision is set. China becomes the second largest economy. So the early US response, at that time, 2011, Obama announced that it is returning to Asia. What does it mean? Obama wants to put about 2/3 of his naval power into the Pacific. So the Chinese leadership, looking at this announcement and looking around Asia, around Pacific, which country deserves 2/3 of U.S. naval power? Japan? No, it is ally. South Korea? No, it is ally. North Korea? Yes, it may have nuclear weapon, but it is a small guy. Nothing to worry. Looking down there, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia? No. China can't find any country which deserves 2/3 of U.S. naval power except China itself. And then at the same time, U.S. started to instigate conflicts in the South China Sea and then started to demoralize the Communist Party of China. They all come at around 2010 and thereon. And therefore, we have to look at it from a historical point of view to understand why, after Obama, we have trade war. So the actual trade war started in July 6, 2018. And then you will see that the trade war values grew up rapidly. At the heat of it, 2020, about $300 billion is charged at 7.5 to 15% extra tax on entry. And $250 billion has a tariff at 30%. Of course, China respond. But you look at the response, it's also very interesting. Initially, when on July 6th, U.S. announced $34 billion at 25% tariff. China matched it with $34 billion. The second lot in August, $50 billion. China matched it with $50 billion. In September, another $15 billion from U.S., China matched it with another $50 billion. Then China cannot match anymore because the total export of China is going to be used up if we follow this path very quickly. So China can't match the $200 billion $200 billion worth of imports. So it keep the 60 billion and then 110, 75, 75. China can't match the amount of imports because the trade deficit, the trade balance. Okay, now we will jump over to another website to look at what Trump do to all these trade war. So the link is here is www.china-briefing.com and then news, the U.S.-China trade war, a timeline. Every space is replaced by hyphen. Okay, and I will stop this share and share the other screen. From here, yep. Share. So I will be reading this website in reverse because it goes in reverse chronological order. So 2011, before Trump becomes president, is still running for president. He already treats, say, China is neither an ally or a friend. Okay, neutral, good, neutral. But unfortunately, he also say they want to beat us and own our country. Unfortunately, China has determined that, actually a long time ago, 2,000 years ago, China is not going to conquer anybody because it is better to have trade and have friends rather than have enemies. And then you have to keep a very large force to hold your enemy down. It is not sustainable. So China never want to own anybody, never want to control the world, and never want to beat anybody. China only wants to trade with everybody. So that was a wrong statement. I put it in red. Later on, 5 years later, when Trump was running for president during his campaign, they say, we can't continue to allow China to rape our country. And that's what they are doing. Well, US companies voluntarily move their factories to China in order to maximize their profit by lowering their manufacturing costs. These companies has always tried to move their factory to areas where the living standard is lower in order to minimize their manufacturing costs. China just happened to be one of the largest country with a huge labor who is willing to work for a penny. And therefore, the US companies move en masse to China. And it is the greatest threat in the history of the world. Well, in terms of threats, as I have explained, when your currency is a fiat currency, by the way, all currencies in the world today are fiat currency, including China's renminbi is also a fiat currency. When your fiat currency can be used to exchange for any valuable asset, whether it's goods or service, without an equivalent amount of work, I call this threat. You steal somebody using whatever means. You steal somebody's asset by printing papers, and then you get your people's asset. So the biggest threat in the history of the world is actually United States. So then they say steel and aluminum impose a threat to national security. There's an interesting story here about steel and aluminum. At the moment, China produces about 80 to 90% of the world's steel, 80 to 90%. But it exports less than 4% of the global international trade in steel or iron. Most of that is consumed domestically within China. Of course, many of those will be exported as other products, refrigerators, etc., or washing machine, etc. But China's production of steel is mostly for domestic consumption. So its release of steel into the global market is minimum. Aluminum is about the same story. Now, China doesn't have a lot of iron ore or aluminum ore. It depends on import. So Australia export a lot of iron ore to China, which was converted into iron and steel, and then being used domestically within China to manufacture different kinds of goods, which are sold worldwide. So when you link it into national security, then nothing can be said. It just link it. 2017, they started the investigation into China's intellectual and property and innovation policies. As I said, China industrialize need know-how. Where can they get the know-how? Well, sending students out to learn, starting research, or buying technology. Buy technology is technology transfer. You pay money for something valuable, technology transfer. And of course, China's want to do it en masse with such a large population. Everybody want to go ahead and they want to have good technology. They are doing a lot of technology transfer. And all countries promote innovations and development. That's similar to every other country. We talk about building up our schools, empowering our universities to innovate and to do research. These are intellectual property and innovations. Every country do it. Then they started talking about putting turrets on solar panel, a strong export from China. Of course, when this 30% turret doesn't work, then you will start something else. Say this solar panel produced in Xinjiang is produced under forced labor or use human rights accusations without proof. On March, want to impose tariff on all steel from everybody except a few countries. Argentina, Australia, Brazil, and South Korea. And then 10% period on all aluminum, except from Argentina and Australia. So, of course, China is included. And for that, China had reacted. So China, a few days later, imposed tariffs on 128 products from United States as a retaliation to the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. Now, here's a very interesting difference between the goods which are being targeted. U.S. target manufactured goods, whereas China target agricultural products. Here we have fruit, wine, seamless steel pipes, which is just a stand out alone, and then pork, recycled aluminum, etc. China is hitting the farmers in United States, which will be the supporter of Republicans. So it is a targeted retaliation. Want to target the voters for Trump. But unfortunately, it doesn't work because after all, this trade war is not a party issue. It's a U.S. issue. It's a systemic problem of the current global geopolitical situation. Then focus on ZTE and saying ZTE violates U.S. sanctions and ban it from doing business for 7 years. And China responded next day with 178% on inputs of sorghum from U.S. Again, an agricultural product. And of course, every now and then they engage in talks. So they engage in talks and Trump say, it will help ZTE. And China's Commerce Ministry say it will stop tariffs on U.S. sorghum at negotiations, using that as a tool for negotiations. So both sides come and forth. So these are all events leading up to the actual trade war. The actual trade war started on 2018, July the 6th. U.S. Custom and Border Protection begins collecting a 25% tariff on 818 imported Chinese products, valued at $34 billion. So that is the first round. Of course, China reacted. On day 5, they put up another list worth $200 billion. And then add another 44 Chinese company into its export control list. Then the aim is obvious. The objective of this is to limit the acquiring of technology by the Chinese. Okay, China reacted, announced a second round of tariffs on U.S. products. Second round tariffs are finalized by U.S. China filed a WTO complaint against U.S. Then the second round, U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on 279 goods originating from China, worth $16 billion. China implement retaliatory 25% tariffs on 333 goods originating from U.S., worth $16 billion. Matching, they match each other, as we had seen before. They match, including coal, copper, scrap, fuel, buses, medical equipment, and so forth. Now, trade war is ongoing now. Of course, during this trade war, there are new threats and new negotiations. On day 81, 2018, September 24th, U.S. implement tariffs of $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, bringing total to $250 billion. China responded by implementing tariff on $16 billion worth of Chinese U.S. goods. China cannot respond to $200 billion worth of Chinese U.S. goods because there just isn't that much U.S. goods to be imported into China. So China cannot match. So what have been matching is now a lot less. You implement 200, I respond by 60 billion. You at 200 billion, the China responds by 60 billion. That pattern continues. Both sides talk, threat, talk, threat, talk, threat. And then sometimes when there's opportunity, they have a working dinner at the G20 summit. And with that, temporarily lower tariffs. And then 3-day trade talks. Of course, they have to talk. What else they can do? Okay, because talk is not going well, so cancel preparatory talks. And then talk again. And then Trump said he will not meet Xi Jinping. And then later they hold trade talks in Beijing. Now remember, this is 2019, okay? Last few months of Trump's presidency. And no, not yet. Biden resumed at 2021. Oh, no, it's still middle of Trump's presidency. Okay, trade talks after 1 month break, and then temporarily suspend the additional tariffs. And then this is an important part. As I said, United States wasn't able to fund its government available money into domestic problem. One of the domestic problems is, of course, drugs. Fentanyl is a synthetic drug. China produced a lot of the building blocks of fentanyl. They have other use in medicine. So China has always spent a number of those variants, but now it bans every variants which will be able to use to be used to produce fentanyl. But the problem is China doesn't have a fentanyl problem. China has a very tight drug control. If you bring any drugs into China over, I think it's 5 grams, then you may face capital punishment. So fentanyl is not a Chinese problem. It's a purely American problem. And the fentanyl available in United States is not produced by China. It is actually produced by Mexico. Mexico get the original building blocks, and they make fentanyl and then ship it to America. So blaming China for fentanyl is like blaming the knife manufacturer because somebody used a knife to attack other people. But anyway, they continue to hold talks, and then need to say enforcement office. Now, all this talk eventually goes to nothing because both sides is not going to hold up to what they promised. The US side doesn't do exactly what the Chinese side requests, and the Chinese side doesn't do exactly what the US requests. So all these talk are just for public consumption. There's no real change in the situation. So another 200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10 to 15% in 2019 May 10. So China responded by a 60 billion worth of US goods, again mostly produce: beef, lamb, pork, vegetables, juice, cooking oil, tea, coffee, refrigerators, and furniture, and among others. Then here come Huawei. Huawei entered into the US entity list. So in response, China also produced another list. It's called unreliable list, and put some of the unreliable entities into the list, similar to what the US had done. So by June 1st, 2019, China increased tariffs on 16 billion worth of US products that come into effect now. Issue paper on US-China economic relationship. These are, again, just for public consumption. What happened is still happening. So they meet again in Osaka during a G20. And then a little bit exemption, another adding of Chinese entity into its entity list, a tentative truce in order for building a so-called good atmosphere for the G20 summit. Trade talks restart, ban on Huawei a little bit relaxed. But we later on will see that actually one of the major target is Huawei, and I will explain what that means next week when we talk about technology war instead of trade. Today we are focusing on trade war. Okay, by July, Shanghai talk with little progress. That they come together, talk and nothing happens. This is typical. At least they need to let the public know, we are talking. But sometimes they signal that we are talking is still too bad. And so they will stop talking. And then later on, they come, okay, we will talk. So this on and off negotiation, tariff threats is typical throughout the whole Trump administration. And then start a new topic, saying declaring China is a currency manipulator because China depreciated a little bit. But at the moment, the renminbi to our Australian dollar is about 1 Australian dollar to 5 renminbi. So China also use other tactics now. Instead of announcing trade tariffs, China asked its company to stop purchasing from U.S. agricultural products. And then delay tariffs on certain products because of the need. All this coming on and on, as I have said. And then retaliation, tit and tat. So on 2019, August 23rd, the Chinese Custom Tariff Commission announced a $75 billion worth of U.S. goods tariffs from 5 to 10%. Carried out in 2 batches, September the 1st and then December 15th. Trump and White House make contradictory statements. Typical, okay? Nothing special here. And then they talk and then come into effect as expected because nothing stopping it. And then China launched another WTO case against USA. Okay, this is almost the end of the U.S. Trump's presidency. So see what's the last item here. On 2019, November the 1st, China wins the WTO case and able to officially put 3.6 billion, nothing, compared with the 60 billion, 3.6 billion worth of U.S. import, but it's symbolic. Talk again, talk again, talk again, talk again, talk again, talk again, talk. Okay. In 2020, January 13, U.S. official drops China's currency manipulator label. And it also started the COVID. COVID-19, although it's called COVID-19 because it was discovered in the Christmas Day in 2019 in Wuhan, and therefore is named as COVID-19. And then China started to have city shut down in 26 January. So January 13, the virus still haven't spread to the rest of the world. So this is unrelated to COVID. Okay, eventually, China and US signed the Phase 1 trade deal, but that trade deal was interrupted because of COVID. Both countries shut down, and when you shut down, of course, all the goods and services also stop. Among the first phase, China to promise to buy a lot of Boeing airplanes. And with COVID shutting down, the world's air traffic go to stop. A lot of countries' airlines is stop service. Of course, there won't be any need for new airplane. So the first part of the trade deal can't carry on. When the COVID becomes eased, then we know that there are 2 Boeing 737 MAX accident, and which caused a global ban on Boeing. And therefore, until now, China haven't resumed buying any airplanes from Boeing. No new order. Whereas China has already placed, I think, 300 airplane orders to Airbus. So you will say, is there any significant relationship deterioration between US and China? The answer is definitely yes, because after all, China has to retaliate, at least in the eyes of the Chinese people. The Chinese government needs to do that. At the same time, the US government also needs to do that. Okay, so that is in February, China started half the tariffs because of the trade deal. And then exemptions. Now, the tariffs still there, but we can put in exemptions. Another new exemptions, and then continue buying the pork. And Trump had to focus on the US presidential election. In May, another new list of commodities excluded from tariffs. Then, as a help for the Trump to win presidency, China make a record deal with US corn, buy a record number of corns from US in July. Okay, I think that's about, yeah, that's about it. So we have a very quick look of the trade interactions between US and China during Trump's time. I will be talking about what happened next during Biden's time. So that will be technology war for next week. Okay, any question? Unmute yourself first, please. Yes, Larry. No, you haven't unmute yourself.
What about the computer chips?
computer chips is within the technology war. So I will talk about that next week.
Okay.
Anyone else? No? Okay, in that case, thank you for your attention, and we will see you again next week the same time. Okay, bye-bye. Bye.